process. Okay, so Jack, I'd just like you to begin your talk. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Anne. Well, I'm going to begin as we advertised on the can with Trump and 100 days. I wasn't sure where the 100 days came from. I mean, I can vaguely remember coming to political consciousness, and it would have been in the Kennedy versus Nixon presidential race. And I can sort of remember Kennedy doing a 100 days speech. Well, it's been pointed out to me. You can just Google these things nowadays. So easy, isn't it? It's been pointed out to me that the origins of that sort of speech, that sort of milestone for US presidents dates back to Roosevelt. And if you wanted to push it back, I'm also told, I think via Google, that there's some sort of significance there with Napoleon Bonaparte and his 100 days, which of course culminated in his Waterloo. All you can say with Trump, though, is what 100 days. It's all been packed in, hasn't it? You can't say it's boring. But I would also make the point that, you know, other than the details, it was all announced. It was all announced in the presidential race. What he promised, he's attempted to act upon in all of its horrors, in all of its glory. So, you know, although he at the time claimed to have no knowledge of it, Project 2025, that seems to be the game plan that Trump has come in with. If you read that, it was recommending the incoming president, and of course we're talking about incoming President Trump, basically to flood the zone. You know, use the huge powers of the US president to come in with not just one after the other. I don't know if anyone's seen the picture in the Weekly Worker. We had that picture of Trump, you know, courtesy of Wikipedia, with his whole desk covered in presidential orders waiting for him to sign out on. That's been the reality, one after the other, after the other, after the other, one initiative after the other. And this is meant to overwhelm the Democrats. And of course, this time, Trump is coming from a much stronger position. He's got the Supreme Court. Well, I know there's some argy-bargy going on there, but he's got the Supreme Court behind him, and he's got Congress behind him. So he's in a extremely strong position here, and he's using it to the full extent. So again, when we come to tariffs, we all knew it was going to come. Did we think when the tariffs did come that this would be a permanent state of affairs? No, no one should have thought that. I don't know if anyone did. This is Trump and his administration basically using shock and awe against friend and foe alike in order to extract a better deal for the United States. And again, looking at the pre-election, you know, Republican plans, you know, there was the idea of, you know, giving various countries a color mark that could include enemies that were prepared to cooperate, but it could also include friends who weren't prepared to cooperate. You punish them. And that is indeed what's gone on. I have to say myself, of course, that I wasn't surprised. No one was surprised when you had these swinging tariffs put on China. That was no surprise. That was way down the line. What has been interesting about that is that so far, neither side has blinked. China hasn't blinked. Trump hasn't blinked. We've seen some movement here. We've seen some talk, from Trump of phone calls. But it would seem that at least at the top level, China's held its nerve. We know way before Trump, China was making preparations for not only trade war with the United States, but something hotter than that. But what we have is the world's two largest economies locked in to this conflict. And the fact of the matter is, as far as I read it, both are dependent. One is dependent on the other, at least at the moment. And so we would expect someone to blink. We would certainly expect there to be back channels open. Who knows what the result will be? Either way, this opens up the prospect, of a global recession. Trump attempts to blame Biden for the shrinkage of the US economy. Okay, I'm not convinced either. To me, that this is very much made under Trump's watch. And okay, we can then speculate to what extent other countries will go down with pneumonia. But I think it's still true that if the United States catches a cold, the rest of the world suffers. And my own guess, for what it's worth, is that China hasn't fully insulated itself. Of course it hasn't. And, exactly what will happen in China. We know it's attempting to open up different avenues. What will happen at home? We've got an article this week by Yasmin Mather looking at this question. And she ends with the observation that in Chinese official publications, in learned journals, in official discourse, the concept of class struggle has been airbrushed out of existence. Now, of course, in part, the explanation for that lies in, Mao's Cultural Revolution. We want to forget all about that. This brings up unpleasant memories for an awful lot of those at the top of the Communist Party of China today. Wasn't Xi banished to the countryside, for example? But when you look at how Yasmin ended her article, she ended it with the class struggle going on the shop floor of one particular Chinese company. But of course, that is reproduced throughout China. And I think, at least in the abstract, what is posed under these circumstances of a trade war with the United States is, can the working class break out of this sort of Soviet type relationship with managers? If you look at the Soviet Union, of course, there was class struggle of a sort. It tended to be, though, siding with your bureaucrat against the wider bureaucracy. Your manager's a good guy, he's on your side. And there was a truth there. The manager in the Soviet Union did attempt to quite a considerable degree look after their own workers. But in China, what we have is capitalists. We don't have, the economy dominated by state concerns. So we've not only got Chinese capitalists, we've got foreign capitalists. What does the working class do under these circumstances? And of course, it's not a question of what it's allowed to do, it's what it's compelled to do. I don't know, but at least I would suggest the possibility of class struggle transcending the level of the enterprise. And of course, that's something that the Chinese government, the Communist Party of China, will be completely fearful of. Myself, I actually discovered this by reading a review by Andrew Murray, of all people. He was criticizing, well, positively, a Chinese book on economics, on the Chinese economy, and just made that point. How comes there isn't the concept of class struggle? So maybe I'm hoping, more than anything else, but at least there is the possibility of class struggle erupting in China because of this. Okay, then we come to Trump and migrants. That doesn't, and its horror doesn't surprise me. I mean, look at the first term. And of course, this goes back to other presidents. In and of itself, it's not new. We've had Red Scares in America. I can certainly remember the aftermath of McCarthyism, people who'd lived in America for decades being booted out. Charlie Doyle, husband of Mickey Doyle, the fund organizer of the Morning Star, he was kicked out of the United States along with thousands of others. I would certainly say that if you look back to the Communist Party of the USA, worthwhile taking, account of its fate. Not only was it thoroughly infiltrated by the FBI, it was driven to, a semi-underground existence. I think that can happen to today's left. And of course, what we've seen under Trump is the mass deportation of migrants to this hellhole in El Salvador. And of course, the idea is the more hellish it is, the more it will go viral and will act in the same way that the Tories were hoping Uganda would act. I think, myself, if we're talking about levels of hell, El Salvador takes some beating, and in that sense, Uganda was somewhere more near the civilized end of hell. But that's the idea, to make the prospect of going to America so bloody appalling that people recoil. The irony is, of course, already there, that if we look at the world going into recession, if we look at putting tariffs on friend and foe alike, the push factor will overwhelm any horror factor. So, if you're living in hell and you're living in the 7th level of hell in your home country, then even the possibility, and it's a remote possibility, isn't it, of being sent to an El Salvador jail would seem attractive for many people, because it isn't 100% guaranteed. It's one of these, how should I put it, statistical, if you get caught, well, but most people ain't going to get caught. Most people are going to get deported and you'll find your way back. But the push factor is going to be there, and it's going to be doubled and doubled again. That's the actual truth of it. Also, again, in terms of display, because I think that this is what has been going on with student activists, around the Gaza question. I think it's also Doge, I think, is theatrics. Elon Musk has made great play of creating havoc. My understanding is that so far under Trump, actual government spending has increased. That doesn't surprise me whatsoever. This sort of destructive anarcho capitalism, I think, is theatre rather than actually cutting government spending. We wait and see, of course, when it comes to real government departments, which will be medical treatment, and will be the Department of Defense. Does Elon Musk go into that? That would be something else. He has talked, for example, and you can't help but agree, our F-35s, for example, really worth the money. in today's world. At least I share his skepticism on that one. Aircraft carriers. Okay, I see their use when it comes to third world countries, when it comes to Yemen. How much use are they going to be, though, if there's a war with China? I don't know. But game planners, when it comes to the military, will be working out such questions. The Middle East. Okay, I didn't predict it. I'm not claiming I could have, but the phrase, the new Riviera on the Mediterranean. This is Gaza, and then the video that he shared. He didn't make. He shared. But of course, no one should treat that seriously. There's no American plan to take over Gaza. There's no Trump plan to turn it into plush hotels and all the rest of it. You had Netanyahu next to him when he made that announcement, and the significance of it was already announced in the election campaign. And so although he held Israel back, his message throughout the election campaign was get the job done, eliminate these terrorists. And the only way you're going to eliminate the terrorists is to get rid of the masses that support these terrorists. So what's going on in Gaza today was announced by Trump in his election campaign. And that's why you had Netanyahu standing next to him when he's talking about, as I say, beaming, smiling. And that's why in Israel, mainstream Zionism welcomed that speech. And it was particularly welcome on the right, because they've got a program of ethnic cleansing soon, as opposed to ethnic cleansing somewhere down the road. But that speech was welcomed, as I say, across the board when it came to Zionist opinion in Israel. So no surprise there. Ukraine, again, no surprise. Okay, I'm not claiming the rare earth deal that we all knew about that. But no, the rough outline of what's going on was announced, and that's some land for peace deal. Russia either gets to keep by law or de facto Crimea, also gets to keep what it had already before this war officially, well, I say officially, before the special military operation began. It keeps most of the land it already had. Remember, we had fighting in the east historically going way back to the Maidan coup. It keeps a little bit more land, so you've got the land corridor with Crimea. The big question comes, who is going to provide the army in terms of some buffer zone, if that's what is agreed? Is it going to be NATO troops? Lavrov has said no. So who's it going to be? Is it going to be British, French, German troops, or are they going to come from a neutral country? Meanwhile, is Trump going to allow, should seem to me he will, is he going to allow Ukraine to be armed to the teeth? And this really brings up then, how does the regime in Moscow respond to such a deal, if there is a deal? I mean, it's still completely open-ended. I mean, it has been put to me, and I can buy into it, that if you're amongst certain circles in the FSB, Kremlin regime, if it's a huge if Putin agreed, for example, to have a highly armed Ukraine, rump Ukraine, but with NATO troops along the Russian border, this would be a huge defeat for Moscow. Because what has Moscow gained for all of these deaths? What has Moscow gained for this, ruinous war when it comes to its economy, let alone the sort of terrible fate of its oligarchs who've had properties and yachts confiscated? I can believe it would become a weapon in terms of some power struggle in Moscow. Of course, I don't know. Either way, what we need to understand is that Trump and the Democrats are united on one thing. Well, might united on many things, but they're united on one thing, and that is the main enemy is in China. And we need to see any deal in that light. So if we imagine a deal of where the United States really arms Ukraine, and where the United States is prepared or not prepared, the United States, either with the agreement of Russia or in spite of the objections of Russia, has European NATO troops up on the front line along the 1,000-kilometer front line that we have at the moment, and beyond that, in the north of Ukraine. How will that go down in Moscow? Either way, I'm skeptical, at least, of Rubio and Trump prizing away Russia from China. I just don't. I can see what they're saying here, but yeah, it is against China, and having a Russia that has NATO troops buffeted up right to its border along Ukraine, that would be objectively, however it's sold, that would be an objective victory for the United States. And I do think, that there are some sections of the left that have played it, as if the aim was a victory, if that, a victory in the sense of Ukrainian armed forces were going to beat the Russian army. I never thought that. I've always had the view that Ukraine would be not a pushover, but the idea that it becomes the other way around, I just never have bought into. So we need to see what victory looks like. And indeed, this peace deal could be a victory for the United States. And indeed, even if the war continues, that would be a victory for the United States. If Kiev collapsed, and I'm talking about Kiev, not Zelensky, if Kiev collapsed, that's a different question. Anyway, the point is still there that the Ukraine deal was signaled, he's pursued it. No one surely took the 24 hours seriously. That was hyperbole. That hyperbole, that was nonsense. Obviously, that's the case. But also, what we need to understand is that what Trump is about, not only with sanctions, but also the Ukraine deal, is extracting more tribute from Europe. And so his version of a deal in Ukraine is that the European powers will bear a far bigger burden when it comes to confronting Moscow, when it comes to confronting Russia. The idea would be to follow Keir Starmer's route, and what the European powers would be expected to do is to purchase US weapons, as opposed to Macron's view of it is that what we do is use this situation to build a European army supplied with European equipment. So again, that is something that I think was telegraphed. I think was something that Trump was banging on about during the election campaign. Now, does that mean that it's all plain sailing for Trump? No, we should take the dispute over Harvard seriously. We should take the dispute with the Supreme Court seriously. How should we characterize Trump? Myself, I don't buy into, it's fascism. I just think that that's an example of, how should I put it, an inability to think. Everything on the right becomes fascism. Okay, if you want an insult word, I don't mind. But I think what's going on in the United States is not a repeat of European fascism. which fundamentally was directed at smashing the working class, which represented a threat to the ruling class. That was the case in Germany, in Austria, well, we can get into what the nature of the Franco regime was, but it played that role of smashing the organized working class. The organized working class, what a pity, does not represent a threat to the ruling class in the United States. And so what is going on there, I think myself, needs to be analyzed in terms of relative US decline. And then we pose the question, can Trump or Trumpism, because who knows whether he will serve a third term, not only because of, you know, custom and law and the Constitution, but also because he's mortal. Who knows whether Trumpism can reverse relative US decline, and whether the United States can extract more tribute from Europe, whether the United States can stop the inevitable rise of China. And what is being constructed in terms of Trump? Myself, you know, I don't take the idea of Trump being Pope seriously. I know he posted that particular AI generated meme, but I do take the idea of him being the king of America, not in the sense with a crown, but I do take the idea of a super American Bonapartism. I do take that seriously. In other words, yeah, the US president is already a Bonaparte, but precisely by curbing the powers of Congress, you know, cheating with curbing voting rights, etc., etc., etc. Third term presidency, I take that seriously. So where is America going? I myself would be much more confident in terms of comrades who want to go. First thing you do is come out with a label. Well, you know, no, I'd be much more confident if comrades were, before they came out with a label, actually started looking at the contradictions in the US ruling class. You know, what's the role of big tech? What is the role of the armed forces? I think that's the sort of route that we ought to be on, rather than either, you know, laying hold of a hand-me-down from the 1920s or 30s. You know, we need real answers on this question, in my humble opinion. Okay, turning to Britain, I don't think they're fascists either, and that's Nigel Farage and Reform. Was it surprising? Again, no, not really. I did go to bed early Thursday. I was tired. I didn't get up and then listen to the news and recoil in horror. I shrugged my shoulders. That doesn't mean that nothing happened. What we had is big news. It's an important event. I mean, there were, what's the statistics? I don't think they're complete yet, so they might have some slight wriggle room, but they're good enough. 1,650 seats up for grabs. Reform won 677. And of course, they lost none because they had none, because they'd not contested this. So it was all gain as far as Reform was concerned. Liberals, Lib Dems, plus 163. Conservatives down 679. Wow. Okay, they can claim, it's true, that they were on a high last time round. True, true, true. Labour Party down 188, figure I've got. Greens up 45. Okay, the by-election, near run thing. Okay, not every day, is it, that your MP takes a bash out of some constituency as it's filmed on video. Okay, it was a fine run thing. I think there were 6 votes in it. But nonetheless, this was a huge, huge event. we've got a situation of where some county councils, some mayoral positions are now with reform. We've had the slightly amusing announcement by Farage and various successful candidates that they're going to cut out council equality departments as if they now exist in councils. My own experience locally, I know that it wasn't up for grabs this time around. My own experience of going down to my council compared with the last time I've been. When I went to Camden Council a couple of years ago, it's a new building, the open plan, a bit full of people working. Last time I went down, there was no one there apart from reception. There are no workers there anymore. All the departments have either been closed or farmed out. So when I'm ringing up somewhere, I'm either getting a Geordie accent or something else like that. The workers ain't there. So all this stuff about getting rid of waste, they ain't fulfilling their statutory obligations. So anyway, either way, reform ain't going to make much difference, except in terms of theatre, and except making a display of making life horrible for the undeserving poor, such as migrants. They want to be seen to make people suffer if they possibly can, and if they can't, then it's the government's fault, sort of type idea. Okay, but it's a big event. Why? Because we could see the leader of the Tory party fall. That's quite conceivable. We could also see the leader of the Tory party, conceivably, reach out to Nigel Farage. And if she doesn't do it, then someone else in the Tory party will do it. If Kemi can't reunite the right, then I will reunite the right. And we've, of course, got politicians, leading politicians, both from the Tory party and the Labour Party, being pushed by TV and radio interviewers. Is it possible that Nigel Farage could be Prime Minister? Well, yeah. Not that they think it's likely, but statistically, it's possible, isn't it? Yes, it is possible. Highly, highly unlikely. And I'm certainly not falling this project these Ashburn County Council, leafy England results onto the national map. Nonetheless, we're talking about in the polls reform running more or less equal with the Tories, more or less equal with the Labour Party. So this matters. So yeah, the reform bubble could be burst very easily. But I do think something's going on here. I'd simply caution it on the basis, though, that what we're dealing with the Tory party is the world's most experienced, longest lived party. It's a class party. It's the historic party of the bourgeoisie. It's certainly true that the British bourgeoisie has declined as a class. When I was young, the Tory party was financed by British businesses. It's now financed by crazy billionaires and, foreigners and people like that. Nonetheless, it isn't a party that we would expect to be just, swept aside. And it's worth noting, of course, however attenuated a form, we also have the Labour Party, a party based on the trade unions as well. And note, when we had the last shift, of real terms, not the SDP, Liberal Alliance and David Owen and all that sort of stuff, but when we saw the fall of the strange death of liberal England, this wasn't only the suffragette movement, militant working class, the Irish. This was the rise of the Labour Party, the rise of a class party. I would be very hard pushed to describe Nigel Farage's party as the alternative party of the industrial bourgeoisie in Britain. What industrial bourgeoisie? Petty bourgeois party, sure. A party that, got maverick millionaires in it. Yeah, sure. Anyway, I'm merely making that argument. It is conceivable, but I think we should be cautious about drawing too many conclusions from these elections. Last point on reform. If we want an example of useful idiots, sorry, comrades, I think it's the Socialist Workers' Party and their front campaign, Stand Up to Racism. And what Socialist Worker is boasting. Do you know they had 20 comrades up to the Runcorn by-election, campaigning under the banner of, Stand Up to Racism. And what were they calling for? Don't vote reform. Well, that's exactly what the Tories were doing, as far as I know, up in Runcorn. It's what the Greens were doing. It's what the Labour Party was doing. So is the advice from the comrades in the Socialist Workers' Party, is it to vote Green? Is it to vote Tory? I mean, logically, if the main thing is to keep out reform, in most of the seats that were being contested in these elections, it wouldn't be a question that your next choice is Labour, the next choice is Tory. That's the truth of the matter. So Stand Up to Racism is actually playing a role that benefits the Greens, benefits the Lib Dems, benefits the Labour Party, but potentially could also benefit the Tory party. After all, what the pundits are saying is there's a possibility, again, I've already made my position hopefully clear on that one. It's unlikely, but I mean, it's possible the next general election you have Reform versus Labour. Why? Because in these elections, at least, you had the phenomenon in terms of first past the post, is that Reform is now the party that Labour has to beat, as opposed to the Tories. In other words, the Tories can be in the unenvious position of the third party. And if that can be hammered home to the electorate by Reform, it's a hugely powerful motivator for electors. After all, I'll readily confess I voted Labour in the last general election. Why? Well, partially because of a class vote, but then my candidate was Tulip Sadiq, hardly a working class candidate. Why? Because also I wanted to keep the Tories out. I had no left candidate. Okay, so I'm amongst the voters that vote negatively. Keep the other, lot out. So yeah, we could be in to that territory. So the SWP, I think, are playing the role of useful idiots. There ought to be a rebellion in the ranks of the SWP. Why? Because at least some of them have been raised on, Leon Trotsky and Trotsky's correct opposition to popular frontism. I'm a child of official communism. Well, not my parents were official communists, but I joined, the YCO as a very, very young person. And I'll tell you this, in official communism, what the Communist Party and what they all knew was the 7th Congress of Comintern, 1935, Dimitrov, of course, supported by Stalin, when the new line came out, unite against the fascists, unite with progressive bourgeoisie. They all knew those politics, right? They didn't know anything about the 6th Congress, the 5th Congress, let alone the 4 Congresses of Comintern. That was completely foreign territory. Remember, we're dealing with the situation before the internet, before Google. This stuff wasn't published, wasn't widely available. And I have to say, my education on that stuff came from a very, indirect route. But now we do have Google, we do have the internet. And, and if you're in the SWP, at least to a degree, you will be familiar, I would hope, with Trotsky's writings on Germany in the 1920s and 30s. And what he said, was exaggerated. It was there for polemical purposes. But he equated 1935 and Dimitrov in his speech at the Seventh Congress, final Congress of Comintern. He equated it with the Second International and August 1914. And he said, you've crossed class lines, which is true. Now, of course, it didn't have the same result as August 1914, but it ought to have that same moral equivalence. And that's what Trotsky was really arguing. So, of course, he was using language to highlight that idea. But that ought to be something that SWPers ought to be laying hold of and saying, hey, comrades, hey, Comrade Nelson, hey, Comrade Kalinikos, hey, Charlie Kimber, what are we doing? Repeating the line of Dimitrov as opposed to repeating the line of Leon Trotsky. There's something wrong here. Why? The fact of the matter is that if you repeat the line of Comintern 1935, you become part of the problem. Why are people voting? Why are they voting reform? Because they're unhappy with the Tories. They're unhappy with Labour. And you're telling them to go back home. Well, what use is that? Why did people vote Trump in the United States? Well, I'd give a small guess. They weren't happy with fucking Biden. And you're telling them to vote Biden. Well, they're saying, we're sick of Biden. We want a change. So what the SWP is, I know they had 2 candidates, but come on, comrades, there were 600 contests. You're telling them to go back. You become part of the problem. That's why I'm saying that the comrades are useful idiots. And that was the role of the official communists in the 1930s. As I say, it's more complex than that, I know. But anyway, forgive me. Okay, 2 more things in terms of the political report. Very quickly, Australia. We seem to have had what at least the press in Britain are saying, the sort of Canada effect. Canada didn't surprise me with Carney. Trump had just come along and said, we're going to turn you into the 51st state. Canadian nationalism. I don't know about the vote in Quebec, but even I would guess the French-speaking Canadians suddenly become very Canadian. Not surprising. And Carney, on the basis of opposition to Trump, romps home. And the Canadian version of the Trumpists are hammered. In Australia, if you talk to Australian observers, they say it's a bit more complex than that. So in Australia, you have the climate question. Dutton, the leader of the coalition, talked about building loads of nuclear power stations. Sort of thing you need in Australia. You've got so little sun, so little natural other reserves, so we have to build nuclear. Health. Dutton wanted an American-style health system. Albanese wanted something much more along the lines of you don't pay for it, you get it by right. That was very much part of his election campaign. Housing, childcare, all of these things mattered. And the right found itself out of line with the electorate. And then you had Trump, the Trump factor. So for us, it's easy to say it's just Trump. But what we're seeing, isn't it? If you look at Britain, if you look at Australia, if you look at Canada, you are seeing the polarization of politics, but it isn't the class polarization. It's not the working class versus the bourgeoisie. It's the polarization of bourgeois politics and the working class being drawn behind one wing of the bourgeoisie or another wing of the bourgeoisie. And that's not a good position for us to be in when we are faced with things like the climate. Is any wing of the bourgeoisie capable of delivering on that? I don't think so. If you look at, war and peace, we've just talked about Ukraine and China, Democrats, and we look at Keir Starmer. The bourgeoisie as a whole are the problem. We need to come up with an answer, and following one wing or another wing of the bourgeoisie is the road to hell. lastly, on that very theme, the announcement in Germany that the secret police have been given carte blanche to infiltrate the main opposition party. What we have is a government now in Germany. It's one of these traffic light coalitions. I think that's what they're called. You know, I don't know what exactly the colors are. One of them's red. You've got the Christian Democrat Union, Social Democrats. I don't know who else. Either way, the point is the Alternative for Germany is the biggest bloc outside the government. And clearly, in terms of the discourse in Germany, calling it an extremist party, calling it a party that's in opposition to the constitution, allowing the secret police to go in and not only monitor, but to put agents inside it, is clearly seen, and this is the tragedy, that some on the left are urging the state to ban it. And precisely my fear is that this is a double-edged sword. In federal Germany, we had the banning of the Communist Party of Germany. Okay, immediately reconstituted itself the German Communist Party. But this thing works both ways. And, if it's legitimate, for example, to ban the leading opposition party, what about Die Linke? Does that not follow next? Die Linke, the inheritor party of the Socialist Unity Party of the GDR. I know that there were the Social Democrats from the West, but the bulk of Die Linke comes from the East. It's the inheritor party of the Communist Party of Germany, Socialist Unity Party. Is that going to get banned next if it becomes too popular? I think that's exactly the danger, that this party again will be declared, it's not really loyal to the constitution. It's an anti-constitutional party. It's hostile to the constitution. It's a great danger, and we shouldn't go down that road. And I'll finish with this one on this section of the political report. I also take the same view with France and, the courts coming out against Le Pen. To me, that was a political decision. This wasn't the equivalent of me getting drunk on a Saturday night, getting into an argument with someone and appearing before the magistrate's court and them saying 15 quid or 20 quid or 50 quid or whatever it is nowadays, drunk and disorderly. It wasn't a judgment like that. This is a political judgment by the top courts in the land, and we should see it as a political act in the same way that surely we should look at what the Supreme Court does in the United States, or the Supreme Court in the UK does, for example, in Britain, the latest judgment around trans rights. Precisely as we pointed out, Mike McNair has pointed out, this is the Supreme Court acting politically on behalf of the Tory party, and one could say the US Republicans. Okay, I'm going to be brief here. I'm going to write a report. Apologies for not writing a report last time we had a Forging Communist Unity meeting. We had a second face-to-face meeting in Manchester yesterday. We had Comrade Ed and Comrade Nick from Talking About Socialism, Comrade Kat from Prometheus, myself, Mike McNair, representing the CPGB, and Yasmin Mather there as well. I think we're making progress. It's very slow. I think we're getting clarity of what the CPGB is saying. I'm sort of slightly intrigued why we need clarity. I thought we were pretty clear, but okay. So, for example, comrades in TAS had been reading the Mug site and had got the impression, I think, through Mug, because there are some comrades in Mug. I don't think it's Mug. This is the Marxist Unity group in the United States. There are some comrades in that organization that talk, for example, about the Democratic Republic in America being the actual aim of the organization. Well, our aim is communism. And our aim in the CPGB isn't just the socialization of the means of production, it's human freedom. The Democratic Republic is a means to that end. It's a way of making the working class into a class for itself. The Democratic Republic, in our view, is the form of the rule of the working class. And if you wanted to use one of Marx's terms that he used for it, it's the dictatorship of the proletariat. I've got no problem in using that word, even if it frightens the horses. That's what we're talking about. So we fight for democracy under capitalism. We call it extreme democracy. And in government, we realize that entire program. We carry out that entire program. And then it's the transition to a stateless, moneyless, classless, free society. As Marx and Engels and Lenin and all the rest of them said, when we have freedom, we have no state. And we can get into the art. That's what they meant when it came to Lenin and Engels. The democracy itself, because it's a form of the state, withers. We extend democracy to such a degree, we no longer need a special organ to suppress anyone, or for that matter, to organize the working class. It becomes habit. We can distribute according to need. That's what we're aiming for. And we're still not sure, and I don't think they're sure themselves, exactly what our comrades in TAS agree. Why? Because they haven't drafted an alternative, and that's something that they've said they're going to do. I think they'll find it quite hard. We've all got this thing in our head that there you are down the road from me. There was Marx, there was Engels, there was Lafarge and Just, what his name was, Gust, in Engels's front room, and there's Charlie Marx, and he just reels off the maximum program. Look, as it makes clear in Engels's correspondence, this program, it's incredibly brief, but this was at least a year of work. They sent out questionnaires in France with the left-wing press. This wasn't something that simply came out of thin air. What Marx was composing is a whole series of red lines that kept out the Jacobins, kept out the syndicalists, kept out the Proudhonists from this French Workers' Party. Anyway, my point is that the comrades are going to go away. We're not saying by when and try to draw. I do say try, it's difficult. And they say they don't reject a transition period. They admire the democracy that we champion under capitalism. So in my view, what you need is a minimum maximum program. Nick Rack, for example, says, well, I wouldn't quite use those words, but okay, I don't care what you call it. But what you fight for under capitalism, and then what you fight for when you become, I would say, a majority, when you seize power, when you smash up the enemy army and the enemy state, and you overcome their constitution, and you put in the proletarian concept. What do you then do? I think you need a program that describes that. Why? Because what you say now about that shapes that possibility. And this was something we discussed around the middle classes. So Comrade Nick, for example, said, I stand for the socialization of everything, including every fish and chip shop. Jack Conrad for the CPGB, and I think the other comrades agree with me. So yeah, we too stand for the socialization of every chip shop, every pub, every corner store, but slowly, very, very slowly. And we need to be reassuring the petty bourgeoisie up to where we take power that will be the case. Meanwhile, although we don't sell out our program when it comes to their exploitation of family members, hours, and all the rest of it, we defend the petty bourgeoisie against the big bourgeoisie, against the banks, against the government. That's our approach. So we don't come out and say, the first act of the proletarian government is to socialize everything. That, in our view, at least, is a mistake. So there's gradualism in the communist program, as well as the rupture. The rupture is on the level of the state. That's the crucial thing. When it comes to socialization, it's a process. So yeah, when it comes to my fish and chip shop down the road, I can reassure my guy, Tony, that when we come to power, Tony, rest assured, we ain't going to be marching in here and saying, right, you're now a part of Tony's London-wide collective of fish and chip shops. No, that's not going to be the case. Okay, what else to say about this process? I think this, and that is when we discussed, why have other unity projects failed? I think they failed for all sorts of different reasons, but two reasons we agreed yesterday of why they failed and why we've at least got a chance. And that is, first of all, we all recognize the importance, the centrality of program. And what I think we have is at least the possibility of the other comrades at least being able to accept our program, because it's very hard for me to say I can accept the TAS program because it doesn't exist. I can't say I accept the Promethean program because it doesn't exist. But I do think that I had a conversation with them. I do think, like if I said, look, here's the CPGB draft program, could you be a member of an organization with such a, yeah, I could be a member. I disagree with this. That's an important strength. And also we're committed, and again, I think this is equally fundamental, we're equally committed against the sect view of politics, the transitional method that we imagine, well, a lot of comrades imagine, that our little group, if it puts forward the right slogan at the right time, such as don't vote reform, that somehow this is the transitional method and it leads to the working class almost by accident finding itself. We reject that. We stand for a mass communist party. We stand for mass communist consciousness. And we also stand for democracy in the party as well as society. So no central committee dictatorship, no closed press that bars minority views. Minorities have the right. We don't advocate factions, by the way. We rejected this, I don't know where it came from. I think it was from your book, isn't it, Mike? Unity and diversity. We don't like the slogan. It's possible you have unity and diversity. That's a possibility. We want to come to an agreement with the comrades in TAS, but we also think that perhaps we won't. But it doesn't matter, because what we can unite on is these two questions: acceptance of a program meant in a genuine way, and also unity around a partyist project, a mass partyist project with the culture that goes hand in hand with that. And that brings me to my last point. Anne, thank you for your, there we are, 2 minutes to go. I'm going to finish on that. Good timing. I'm going to finish with party culture. We had a good discussion on party culture. The second session went a bit pear-shaped. We were just sort of discussing this and discussing that, but it was about language. It was about polemics. We all said our polemics, including my own, should be accurate. Try. We can always exaggerate. I plead guilty. The idea I'm the only one would be ridiculous. We all do it. And the question then comes, is this an example of healthy culture or unhealthy? And I simply turned around to comrades. I couldn't quote the exact words, but I quoted a young Charlie Marx. And this is when he was facing, I think it was triple censorship from the Prussian authorities. Anyway, he came out with this line, didn't he? That you only have one color, it's gray. Gray upon gray upon gray. The official color. I, on the other hand, I like the colors of the rainbow. And he finished with this remark, that with freedom of expression, it's like the rose. The rose doesn't come without thorns. The rose comes with thorns. And if you stand for freedom of expression, you have to recognize the danger that your thumb is going to be pricked. And so that means in terms of our culture, there will be polemics. There will be polemics that you think are unfair, unwise. You can say that. But I turn around to the comrades who are saying, well, you said this, you said. And I said, well, are you going to stop me? Because for us, this is a red line. We are not going to agree to have a party culture that restricts freedom of speech. This is our best method of fighting the right. This is our best method of fighting opportunism. This isn't the leadership bullying people. This is the equipping people with the ability to stand up to opportunism, no matter where it manifests itself, whether it manifests itself amongst comrades coming into the movement, but also those that have established a cozy existence at the top of the movement. So we do stand for robust polemics, and I think we got that over. So I think that it was a very positive meeting. We can't say that we made miles of progress, but what we all agreed is that the forthcoming Communist University would allow us to get together, would be a qualitative development in the forging communist unity process. So it was a positive meeting. We're going to be meeting again online in a couple of weeks, and we will be pursuing less on the program side and more on the question of the actual process of fusion, what it is to be a member, what sort of structures we're talking about, what sort of a unity conference would we be envisaging. All of these will be new, but I think that we are all positive about where we've come from, and we're recognizing that there are limits to what we agree in terms of program. But okay, so what? That doesn't stop us uniting. There's sufficient area of agreement to allow us, I think, in everyone's opinion, allow us to unite. Yeah, finish with that. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Jack. I've already got 2 people indicating to speak. I just wanted to make a couple of brief points myself before I bring Tina and Ian in.